Well, I had the great good fortune of seeing this film right now for the first time.
Oh, wow.
And
Really?
the prospect of getting up here with Jacques and talking about it is torture. The perfect English word. It is, but it's also incredibly exciting because I think that is one of the most pulsatingly alive pieces of cinema I've seen in many, many a year. So, congratulations. The big question is where to start. So, as a writer and director myself, I just want to go back. How long? How long ago did you read this passage in this book and have this idea?
Combien de temps ça a duré? Oui, c'est ça, oui. Je sais pas, je crois que ça doit faire 4 ou 5 ans. For 4 or 5 years.
Okay. Okay.
Je suis assez long.
But it takes me a long time all the time.
4 or 5 years for that film is very worth it. Okay, so you read this passage, you have this idea for this character, and then you start, and from what I understand, we've talked a little bit about this, that you had this idea for an opera, oui?
Oui. C'est bizarre, c'est que le premier texte que j'ai... Bon, je lis un roman, dans ce roman il y a un chapitre au milieu, et dans ce chapitre il y a un personnage de narco qui demande à un avocat, c'était pas une avocate, qui demande à un avocat de l'aider à organiser sa transition. Et l'auteur du roman ne développe pas ça, il passe à autre chose après. Et que moi, je l'appelle le lendemain, je lui dis, je lui demande s'il a un projet avec ça, il me dit non, donc voilà, moi je l'adapte. Ce qui m'étonne, c'est que le premier texte que j'écris dessus, qui doit faire une 30aine de pages, c'est en fait un livret d'opéra. C'est divisé en actes. Ce sont pas des scènes, ce sont plus des tableaux que des scènes. Les personnages sont assez archétypaux. Il n'y a pas de psychologie, pas énormément de psychologie, mais ça m'étonne vraiment beaucoup parce que je ne sais pas pourquoi ça m'est venu sous forme d'opéra. Voilà.
I'm very happy I don't have your job.
Tu gagnes du temps pour tes questions.
Well, the strange thing is that when I first wrote the text, well, let's take a step back. I first read the novel and there was a chapter, and in that chapter there was a character who was a drug kingpin who asked a male lawyer, it wasn't a female lawyer like in my case, to help him transition. And the author of the book does not develop this character at all. So the very day after, I gave him a call and I said, do you have any plans to work on this? And he said, no. I said, okay, I'll do it. So the very first time I wrote a treatment that was only like 30 pages long, and it was not for a libretto. There were no scenes as such, there were just set pieces, and the characters were very archetypal, there was no psychological development, so I'm not sure why I chose to write it in that form.
Okay, so then over time, it transitions from opera to screenplay. Oui? At that moment, what was the biggest, what was the driving factor? Why did you say, I mean, obviously you're an amazing filmmaker, so was it just that I make films, so it must be a film?
Alors c'était pendant longtemps avec les musiciens, j'avais commencé à travailler avec les musiciens, avec Camille et Clément, Clément Ducol. Et vraiment, il y a à un moment donné, je sais pas depuis combien de temps on travaillait, mais j'ai posé la question, j'ai demandé à Clément, mais on est sur quoi là? On est sur un projet de scène ou sur un film? Et il m'a répondu immédiatement un film. Alors j'ai posé la question, mais pourquoi tu ne l'as pas dit plus tôt? C'est quand même bizarre. Et en fait, je crois que quelque chose me dit que si ça avait été un opéra, il aurait dû écrire 2 heures de musique de plus. C'était compliqué.
So I started working with my musicians, with Camille and Clément Ducol, and we worked on it for quite some time. At a certain point, I found myself asking Clément, but what is this that we're writing? Is it a scene for an opera or is it a movie? And he told me right away, it's obviously a movie. And I told him, why didn't you tell me sooner? And I think if it had been an opera, we would have needed to write at least 2 more hours of music.
All right, well, I have to say, one thing I love about this movie is, one of the many things, is how seamlessly it transitions into song. And I think musicals are such a difficult thing to capture successfully on screen. This somehow subverts that. And it's right from the opening, right out of the opening credits, that sonic landscape of the movie, the way you're coming down over the city and you're hearing the refrigerators, stoves, all that. It sets up this sort of overture, this sonic overture, where you think, oh, I know I'm in for something different. This is a different type of sound that we're going to be hearing, and it continues, and it takes us right into the first song at some point. Was this a concern of yours as a filmmaker, of how to transition from really verite, real verite, into real heightened music? I mean, it's an incredible accomplishment that it's so seamless. How big of a fear of this was it of yours going in, of like, will I bridge this?
Oui, t'as raison. Il y avait une chose, c'était à quoi servaient les parties chantées et à quoi servait le score, la musique, le score. Moi j'ai mis beaucoup de temps, avec les musiciens, on a mis beaucoup de temps à comprendre. Moi je croyais qu'il fallait, par exemple, j'espère que je m'exprimais clairement, qu'il fallait unifier d'une certaine façon les chansons. Tu vois, qu'il y ait un style musical des chansons. Entre nous, on appelait ça la mexicanité des chansons. Et ça, c'était comment ça, c'était une erreur. Parce que moi, je me suis aperçu d'une chose, c'est que les musiques, les chansons devaient être toujours... devaient amener du contraste, elles devaient contraster, il ne devait pas y avoir d'unité entre les chansons. Et en revanche, le score devait tout unifier. D'où cette musique un peu liturgique. Et voilà, ça s'est fait comme ça. Et c'est pour ça que j'ai l'impression que ça marche à 2 vitesses différentes, tout ce qui est chanson et tout ce qui est score. C'est vraiment, le score, c'est comme si ça passait au-dessus, comme si c'était la pensée générale du film. Ça vient, oui.
Yeah, you're right. The way you described it is accurate. I needed to ask myself the question, what role do the songs play and what role does the score play? With my musicians, we talked about it for a long time because it took me a while to fully understand this. At the beginning, I thought that we needed to have a unified style for all the songs, but that was a mistake. I finally realized that we needed to have a sharp contrast between what the score did and what the songs did. And in return, the songs needed to clarify certain points, and the score was there to unify. And so that's why you have this sort of liturgical style to the score as such. So there were these 2 layers, where on the one side the songs with a certain function, and then on the other side the score with the unifying concept.
Is it clear? Oui. Okay.
Parce que même pour moi, c'est pas vraiment très clair.
So you were working with your writers who were composing songs, and I know we talked a little bit about this the night you were over, and I talked a little bit about Thomas a bit too, but it sounded like you were working with the songwriters and the musicians, but you're also writing a screenplay simultaneously. How did that trade back and forth? Were you giving them pages as you went? I mean, they couldn't have been writing in a vacuum, right? So what was that collaboration like, and how ongoing was that between you, Jacques, as screenwriter, and them as songwriters?
C'était très empirique, en fait. C'était très empirique. Comment le scénario, ce que j'écrivais avec Tom, disons le matin, on écrivait le matin, on donnait nos feuilles, notre copie l'après-midi aux musiciens. Les musiciens travaillaient à côté. Alors, la vraie question là-dedans, c'était pour moi, c'était qu'est-ce qui allait faire chanson ou pas, tu vois. Et alors, dans le scénario, une fois qu'on avait écrit le truc, je savais que telle partie amènerait des chansons, des trucs comme ça. Mais finalement, ça s'est vraiment fait, je dis de manière très empirique, c'était vraiment jour après jour, voilà, jour après jour. Et comme les musiciens, comme Camille et Clément, vraiment travaillaient très vite, très vite, ils écrivaient des chansons, mais vraiment à toute vitesse, ça nous permettait de revenir beaucoup dessus, tu vois, et d'ajuster. Mais ça s'est fait, c'est ça, on a fait notre cuisine comme ça, jour après jour. Alors voilà, attends, je continue un petit peu.
Oui.
Je suis intéressant. C'est-à-dire que je pense que quand on parle de ça à un public américain et un public de techniciens, vous avez, vous, une très grande habitude de la comédie musicale et d'un modèle de comédie musicale. En France, on n'a pas du tout ça. Mais même dans la fabrication, on n'a pas ça. Il faut presque inventer, tu vois, les choses. Et ce qui fait que l'approche est différente. Oui, c'est ça, l'approche était forcément différente. On a tout appris en même temps, tous en même temps.
It was all very empirical. Tom and I would write in the morning, and then we would give our pages to the musicians in the afternoon. And what was challenging for me was figuring out what in the script would make a song, would be enough material for a song. In the script, I knew that certain parts were suited for that, but then it was very empirical. Day after day, we would decide what actually would make it into it. Camille and Clément worked very fast, so they gave us the opportunity to really adjust what they were doing little by little as we were working. So we would sort of cook it like that, day after day, together. And you know, when it's, can I continue? So when I talk about this to an audience like this audience, which is made of industry people who knew, you know, who are very familiar with musicals in America, and they have an idea of what a musical would be like as a model. Well, what we did was completely different. It was a radically different approach in terms of our craft. And what it was is that we all learned together as we went along.
Yeah, it's amazing. I will say it's rare that you sit in a theater like we did tonight and see something that continually surprises us, but still feels totally organic to the story that's being told. I think that is one of the great feats of this movie. I never felt thrown from the movie, and considering how many genres are held within this movie, that's quite exceptional. I mean, it really is. And I think that is all tied together, for me, by tone. The tone you strike in this movie somehow, through all the changes, remains consistent, from melodrama to humor, from thriller to musical, obviously, and everything in between. When you're working with your actors, how did you talk about this movie early on? Like, how did you speak about it with them, or do you just let your screenplay do the talking for you?
Oui, c'est ça. Comment moi, j'ai eu la chance de travailler là avec je ne dis pas ça par conformisme, mais j'ai eu la chance de travailler avec des actrices vraiment formidables et qui étaient un peu prêtes à toutes, je ne sais pas comment dire ça, simplement à toutes les expériences. Elles n'étaient pas, elles aimaient bien être bousculées, elles aimaient bien parce qu'en plus, moi, il s'avère que même dans le cadre d'une comédie musicale où les choses doivent être un peu réglées, parce que quand ça danse, il faut répéter, tu vois, quand ça chante, il faut répéter. Et que même moi, sur le plateau, je me sentais suffisamment libre pour changer des choses. Et elles étaient, elles aussi, suffisamment solides pour accepter les changements que je proposais. Et la chose la plus singulière, quand même, c'est que tout a été tourné en studio à Paris. C'est-à-dire que je me suis aperçu, moi, en repérant au Mexique, que le réel me collait par terre. Je ne me permettais pas que le film appelait beaucoup plus de stylisation que ne m'aurait jamais donné le décor naturel. Et ça, c'est le retour, d'une certaine façon, c'est la trace de l'opéra Le fait que tout est fait en studio. Je sais plus où je voulais en venir, je suis perdu. I'm lost. Je t'ai rejoint.
Well, I was very lucky with my actresses, and I'm not just saying this because one says that out of conformism. My actresses were formidable, and they were so open to experimenting, and I brought them all over the place, you know, and in a musical, there's so much that can happen. There's all these dance pieces, and there's so many different things that can take place, and I felt that I was so free to change as I was going along on the fly, even on set, because they were solid enough to accept all of that. And so I shot it all in the studio in Paris, because when I did scout on location in Mexico, and I realized that the reality would take me down. And I needed to have a much greater degree of stylization, because there still is that operatic DNA. And I'm not sure why I was saying this and what took me here, but
It's literally translating everything. Even Jacques' vulnerability in the moment. I just think we should take a moment to salute these incredible actresses. I mean, everyone. Some of the actresses we know, and I think you pushed them to places I've never seen them go before, and they were just ferocious and courageous performances. I just saw no fear. Just, I'm gonna go wherever the fuck this character needs to go. And it felt so unleashed in a really palpable way. So congratulations on that. Your cinematographer, I just want to talk about for a moment. Is this the first time you've worked with this?
No, it's the second time. With Paul Guillaume, the DP?
Yep.
Yes, it's the second time. He's really young, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, the film was stunning. What was the sort of, where do you start on a movie that's this variant? Like, where do you start when you're in conversation with DP? Do you just start at the beginning and go scene by scene, or do you talk bigger picture at the beginning? Both, right?
J'ai ma gaine, pardon, j'ai mal au dos.
Sorry, I had my pain.
Vous entendez? Ah bon, oui, comment j'appelle?
C'est ce que je vous disais tout à l'heure, c'est que même si j'avais du mal à l'exprimer, je pense que j'avais une forme, le film avait sa forme. Et que pour moi, la scène la plus emblématique de ça, c'est la première scène qu'on tourne, le premier jour de tournage, c'est la première scène du film. C'est Alligato, c'est le marché. Et je disais que si tu poses une scène comme ça, avec le personnage qui vient vers toi, et tout à coup le peuple arrive derrière, c'est comme une pièce de Brecht. Je ne sais pas comment te dire, on est dans une stylisation. Si le spectateur accepte ça, il acceptera tout. Et ça, il faut le mettre dès le départ. Il faut que dès le départ, il faut amener dès le départ ce niveau de stylisation. Après, ça te donne une grande liberté, tu fais ce que tu veux.
Even though I had a hard time sort of describing it, I did have a clear form for the movie in mind. And the very first day of shooting for me is very important. And what we shot first was the Alligato scene, the very first one, and the opening scene of the movie. And when you create a scene like that with a character that walks forward and then all of a sudden she's surrounded by a whole bunch of people, it's a very Brechtian scene. And so if the viewer accepts that and takes it on, then the same viewer will accept everything else that comes forward. So it's a great degree of stylization that one needs to be on board with.
Yeah, that first scene is absolutely riveting and has such a sense of, it has so many colors in it. There's a sense of danger, there's a sense of propulsion, there's a sense of vulnerability, and then how that segues into the court scene is just beautiful. I don't always do this, but since Jacques is here, does anyone out here have a particular question? Sir?
You're French, but you do this film not only in Spanish, but in Mexico. What made you decide to do that, and how did you analyze or absorb the cultures to get it so, it felt so authentic and so genuine. I was,
Je sais pas comment. Pardon, monsieur, vous aviez terminé.
Have you finished?
yeah, basically. I was trying to figure out a way to wrap it up, but I think that is.
Et moi, je me suis. J'avais pas envie de. Vous êtes gentil d'abord, mais parce que comment j'avais pas envie de faire un film comment dire folkloriste. Ça peut se dire. J'avais envie de faire un film. J'ai fait un premier plan au tout début, c'est encore c'est avant le générique, comme ça, vous savez, on arrive, c'est un plan fait, c'est un travelling très rapide que j'ai fait tourner à 5 images secondes. On arrive sur des mariachis qui chantent comme ça, des trucs. C'était d'une certaine façon pour en finir avec le folklore. Je montre des mariachis au début, c'est terminé, il n'y en aura plus. Et donc, oui, voilà, alors, non, moi je ne sais pas si c'est un film, oui, c'est un film mexicain, ça parle, ça chante, ça parle mexicain, mais c'est quand même, là encore, c'est comme dans un opéra, parce que c'est très stylisé, c'est pas... En plus, je ne parle pas du tout espagnol.
First of all, that's very nice of you to say. And I didn't want to make a movie that would be folkloristic, if I can put it that way. When the movie starts out, even before the beginning credit roll, very quickly you see some mariachis, and so I put them right in the start so that could be over and done with. You see them, you know where you are, that's it. So yeah, it was a Mexican movie and people speak Mexican Spanish, but it is very operatic and highly stylized, and having said that, I don't even speak Spanish at all.
Je le regrette aussi.
Amazing.
And I regret that.
There's certain scenes in this movie that are so intimate, and so just small and gentle. Now, I mean, I feel like that's something that cinema catches that you can't really do on a stage in the same way. And I'm thinking of that because of the musical. Did you ever worry about the distance you had to travel tonally from these bigger, broader moments to this? Were you always confident, Jacques, and it's just because you've made so many incredible movies at this point that you thought, I can bridge that? Or was that something as a filmmaker you had to kind of see to start feeling? Do you know what I mean? Did you have to start filming it to see things? I know from talking with you a little bit and with Thomas a little bit on how you work, that you have a way of shooting extra films, shooting extra scenes.
Oui, oui.
And so I'm wondering how much you did that to try to connect the pieces, because it's, again, so seamless.
Là, j'ai pas pu le faire vraiment, Tom, parce que il y avait vraiment il y avait le chant, la danse, tout ça. Donc j'ai pas pu, parce que c'est vrai, d'habitude, si j'ai un décor des comédiens, j'ai toujours des idées de scène, j'écris vite des arguments de scène, je les donne et puis je les fais jouer. Voilà. Et le résultat de ça donne des scènes qui n'ont pas vraiment à voir avec le film, qui bousculent un petit peu l'ordre, mais qui sont très agréables à regarder, très agréables pour les acteurs à jouer. Là, j'ai pas pu le faire. Mais je pense qu'en fait, je ne sais pas si ça répond bien à ta question, mais le fait d'avoir travaillé si longtemps dessus, d'avoir travaillé sur des dossiers que moi j'ignorais, tu vois, la musique, le chant, la chorégraphie de Damien Jallet, que je pense qu'on a tellement travaillé qu'il est né de ça pendant une idée assez précise, pour moi une idée assez précise de ce que je voulais. Et alors, je ne sais pas si on en parlait tout à l'heure, mais très vite, j'ai compris que j'ai voulu que la forme, que le film change de forme régulièrement, que le film soit lui-même en transition, tout ça, qu'on passe par la telenovela, le drame familial, le film de narco, etc., etc., etc. Et le film change, voilà, c'est comme s'il y avait une espèce de vortex, il avançait en changeant. Et je ne sais plus pourquoi je te racontais ça, mais... Ah oui, c'est ça, parce que tu parlais de l'ensemble des choses. Moi, très très vite, j'ai eu le sentiment que ce film devait changer de genre à mesure qu'il avançait.
Well, no, in this movie I couldn't do that the way I normally do because of all the singing and dancing that required a lot more preparation. Because normally, as you said, I do have this habit of writing quick scenes that are extra. When I have my sets and I have my actors, I just write a page or two and then I slip it to the actors and they have a lot of fun shooting that. And then I put them in my final editing and I change the order. But in this particular movie, because of the way of how complex it was, I couldn't pull that off. So here, I worked on it for so long with all the many different components that I wasn't really used to, like music or the choreography that Angela did. And so by the time we got to set, the idea was so precise that quickly I realized that I wanted for this movie to be a transition as well. You know, the genre needed to move from one genre to the other, and it went from being a telenovela to a crime movie to a family drama. So the way the characters change, well, the film changes in terms of its genre as well. And I wasn't quite sure why I was doing this. Yeah, because you were talking about the ensemble factor and moving from large pieces to smaller pieces. Well, the important part is that I quickly realized that I wanted for my movie to transition between genres as well.
That's incredible. I have to, one more and then we're going to go. It's getting late, but I have to say, you watch this film and this gentleman asked a question and talk about the authenticity, and it's incredible to think that most of this movie was shot on a soundstage, and that they created all these rooms. And if you watch it, you feel so transported in this movie, and it never feels small. It never feels insular. It keeps expanding and expanding and expanding.
Ça a été une découverte pour moi. C'est la première fois que je fais un film entièrement au studio, mais j'ai pris un plaisir, mais coupable. Et vraiment, j'ai adoré ça.
It was a discovery for me as well. It's the very first time that I shoot a movie entirely in a studio, and I took such great pleasure in doing that. It was really a discovery.
It's terrifying. All right, I think they're asking me to wrap up. We could all talk about this movie for about 24 hours straight, and I'm sure we'll be thinking of it long beyond there. First, to our translator for her amazing. To our distinguished guest, Jacques Audiard, and his magnificent. Thank you, Joe.